and welcome to the Global Maritime Forum. We have a press panel here, and this is our 7th annual summit, and here at the summit we focus on facilitating conversations in the maritime industry and make sure that we foster that conversation and make progress on sustainability. And we have been of several interesting ideas, and we are now in Japan for the first time with our summit. Japan is, as most of you I'm sure know, an important maritime hub, global top 3 when it comes to being ship owners, and we also have the entire maritime value chain here in Japan. So it's a very important location for a conversation like this. I just want to give you a little bit of practical information. As you can see in the title, it is not a news conference. We hope that this is a panel discussion that will bring you knowledge and maybe some interesting angles for articles, and that it will serve as a foundation for a relationship and future conversations, both today and further on in the future when it comes to the maritime industry and sustainability. With us, we have Johanna Christensen, CEO of the Global Maritime Forum. We have Mr. Arsenio Dominguez, Secretary General of the International Maritime Organization. We have Watanabe-san, Head of Sustainability at MOL, Mitsui O.S.K. line, and Laure, Baratgin, Head of Commercial Operations at Rio Tinto. And each of those will provide a short introduction in a couple of minutes. This press room is available for the rest of the summit, and the Secretary General will have a fireside chat later today, where you're also very welcome. It'll be half an hour. And we have some contact information also for myself and my colleague Molly, if you need further information, if you in the future need to contact us. The agenda today is introductions. Then the participants will introduce themselves and their organizations. Then we'll have a panel discussion, and then you journalists will have an opportunity to ask questions. And then we'll have a little bit of a photo session and a gaggle at the end. So I know some of you are experienced maritime journalists and some are not. So just there's a couple of kind of key issues. We are responsible in the maritime industry for about 2 to 3% of world CO2 emissions. It is regulated at the UN level, at the International Maritime Organizations, where we are so lucky to have a representation. And we have a strategy and an ambition to reach zero emissions by 2050. But there are some big industry challenges. Like, what is the regulation going to be to reach these goals? Will there be enough fuel to reach these goals? And how will the companies manage the price gap between fossil fuels and zero-emission fuels? Those are some of the current big conversations in the industry. And we are committed to shaping the future of seaborne trade. We are a not-for-profit organization, so we are just facilitating the conversation. And to give the introduction to our organization in the Global Maritime Forum, I have Johanna here. So you're up next.
Thank you, Rasmus. Thank you so much for that introduction. So as said, my name is Johanna Christensen, and I'm the CEO of the Global Maritime Forum. As Rasmus already mentioned, we are a not-for-profit organization working with the entire maritime ecosystem. And we do so globally. And as you already alluded to, a lot of what we do is around facilitating conversations, because we believe that having good, constructive conversations is part of what facilitates change as well. It's a way that we learn about issues. It's a way that we learn about new strategies to address challenges, to take advantage of opportunities. and it's a way that we can help drive progress in this industry. So the way we do that concretely is, for example, like here during these few days, convening senior executives from across the global maritime ecosystem, and really from all parts of that ecosystem, so the entire maritime value chain, coming together, meeting for 2 days, having discussions on the different challenges, opportunities that the sector stands before the sector. And then we use all of the discussions, the ideas generated there, and we use that to build coalitions, build initiatives, and actually to take some of those things forward, some of the stuff that gets discussed here. And we do it in a somewhat untraditional way. It's really a working form. There is some opportunity to sit and listen to experts, but much of the time participants are rolling up their sleeves and really working on the topics at hand. And we find that to be a really fruitful way of engaging and for really making change. What we typically try to do is where a lot of industry associations are built around building consensus. We don't have that burden. That's a really, really difficult situation to be in. I know you are too, Mr. Secretary General, in a situation where you have to build a consensus amongst many divergent views. We, of course, have all of those divergent views in discussions here at the annual summit as well. But actually, what we try to do is we try to find the leaders on any one issue. And we have some examples of those leaders here, the first movers, that are really trying to take action on difficult challenges, and through their actions we can learn what works, what doesn't, how to make progress. And so we form leadership coalitions that really try to drive change, and that's how we work. That typically now leadership coalition, it's quite a broad concept, but in practicality what it means is that we effectively establish working groups on specific topics. We have projects that go much deeper into specific challenges, and I'm sure Laure and Watanabe-san will be talking about some of those as well, where we tackle the more specific issues at hand. At current, we have 2 big programs. One is focused on shipping's decarbonization and how to meet the goals that in the meantime have been set by the International Maritime Organization, and for which we are very grateful. And the other big program is focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the maritime sector. On the first, we're really focused in 2 speeds, or two tracks in a way. The one track is what are the actions that we need to take to do today in order to achieve the ultimate goal of a zero emission future for shipping by 2030. By 2050. Oh, good God, that would be terrible. So what are the things that we have to do in the near term in order to achieve the long-term objective? And we do that through many, many different efforts, and I hope we can get into some of those during this press panel. And then the other one is very much focused on, so maybe just to clarify, it's really about how do we instigate, or how do we propel a fuel transition effectively, which is what is required to achieve the 2050 goal. Another track in this work is focused on efficiency, because any efficiency gains that can be made today they will pay back multiples in the future. And so it's about all the little things that can be done, whether it's from an operational perspective or from energy saving technologies perspective, that can be done to reap immediate emissions reductions. So those are the things we work on in that regard. And then we have another big program, I should say a developing program on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the maritime sector. It's a sector that faces significant talent shortages, and that's both on land and at sea. And what we see very clearly in the maritime industry, that it has not yet succeeded in widely tapping a whole part of the population, half of the population, and that's something that we'd like to change. So this is a big focus of our other program.
Thank you, Johanna. And just that half is women. Just,
just to clarify.
Mr. Dominguez?
Thank you. Very briefly, I'm the Secretary General, Arsenio Dominguez, the Secretary General of the International Maritime Organization, and of course I'm here representing 176 member states that gathered together to make sound decisions in order for shipping, international shipping, to continue to trade in a safe, secure, and environmentally sound manner. We also have all the stakeholders that participate and, of course, enrich the regulatory process, and that on the more than 145 international governmental organizations as well as non-governmental organizations. And this, of course, is where the experience and the expertise come together with the regulatory process in order for our systems to continue to evolve on a regular basis. We regulate over 50,000 merchant ships, and of course looked after the education, training, and well-being of nearly 2,000 seafarers around the globe. Now, there are several areas that we work very closely with all the member states when it comes to shipping, but the ones that normally hit the headlines are the environmental regulations. But I'm going to take a step aside from this, first to congratulate Johanna and the work that GMF is doing, in particularly on diversity, inclusion, and equity, which is one of the key priorities that I have brought with me to the International Maritime Organization, because she's absolutely right. There's more space for women. I do not agree that because we are a traditionally male-dominated sector, that's the way that should continue, and is one of the big drivers that I'm taking forward in order to introduce even more change within the sector. So thank you for that support. You all know the GHG IMO strategy, so I will not go into details. What I can tell you is that we are on track to develop the technical and economic measures to be finalized and adopted at the end of next year for entry into force on the 1st of April 2027. And that's taking into account a full impact assessment of what could be the negative impacts, if any, on international trade as well as member states. And the way that we are moving this forward is also addressing the concerns from, in particularly, small island developing states and least developed countries, because the consensus that we're being at IMO is not just on the adoption of the regulations, for their implementation as well, because that's when the rules become effective. And we are on track to meet the goal of decarbonizing by around 2050. We still have a lot of work to do in relation to the development of the new and alternative fuels, as well as the new technologies that support this transition. But when it comes to the 2030 goal, I continue to highlight that it's already in existence low-hanging fruit and operational and technical measures that can be readily implemented and that would allow us to reach the goals of 2030 of reducing emissions by 20, aiming at 30%, and of course looking at the uptake of fuels of at least alternative fuels of at least 5%, aiming at 10%. And this is in line with the research and development that continues to be carried out, not just by IMO, by other bodies like the GMF, which I'm also very grateful for. And it's this exchange of knowledge and experience, and what the GMF brings also to the work of IMO is the interaction with different stakeholders, where we can learn of what steps they are taking and how others can learn from it. Because whenever we talk about cooperation, the reality is that we need to focus on how we share that information for everybody to be able to take advantage of the new opportunities that this green transition is bringing to international shipping.
Thank you, Mr. Dominguez. And Watanabe-san?
Thank you, Rasmus. 皆さん、こんにちは。ようこそいらっしゃいました。I'm Watanabe, Chief Sustainability Officer of MOL. MOL is an international shipping company based here in Japan. And we are a multimodal shipping enterprise, not just focusing on the seaborne transportation by one type of ship. We always operate the more than 800 the large cargo ships. And then please see the slide of MOL. Thank you. We have been determined to be a first mover in shipping decarbonization, and we have announced our own ambitious target of net zero emission by 2050 more than 2 years ago. Two main solutions for that purpose. First, the conversion of the vessel fuel from conventional bunker fuel to new low emission or zero emission fuels. And the second is the enhancement of the voyage efficiency of our fleet by installing the new devices on board, including the Wind Challenger, our own technology of wind assist devices. We are estimated to reduce the 70% of our GHG emission from our value chain by the conversion of our vessel fuel, and we also estimate the 20% reduction, elimination of the GHG emission from our vessels by enhancing the voyage efficiency. If I add one last thing, we are very active as a part of the several international initiatives because we believe any single company cannot contribute much in the decarbonization and the field of the environment and sustainability. So I wrote the name of some the major international initiative other than Global Maritime Forum. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laure. I'm the head of commercial operations for Rio Tinto, which cover for our maritime chartering and logistics activities, both for our inbound and outbound trades for the group, as well as also some commercial services, back office activities, digital and health and safety for our commercial department. Decarbonization is at the heart of our business strategy at Rio Tinto, and we basically are preparing for our net zero future in delivering not only materials that are essential to the decarbonization of the world, but as well as decarbonizing our own scope of production on scope 1 and scope 2, but as well as our supply chain. So we're laying down here just a pathway that we set for ourselves to achieve that net zero emission world by 2050 with different milestones. And as far as shipping is concerned, we are having the ambition to bring 10% of our time charter fleet with net zero fuel powered vessels, and then going to 100% by 2040, again on a time charter basis, as a step forward for full net zero shipping of our product by 2050. In terms of, additionally, in terms of carbon intensity reduction, we're working towards the 40% carbon intensity reduction by 2025. Actually, we achieved this already this year. So now working towards the reach of the 50% carbon intensity reduction on the basis of 2008 by 2030. So how we do that? Like Watanabe-san mentioned, we are using essentially three main levers, the fuel efficiencies and the efficiencies on fuel consumptions. Not only looking at using larger sizes vessels, optimization of routing, but also installing quite a number of energy-saving devices on our own vessels. We are also a ship owner of 17 vessels, but also working closely with our partners in the shipping space, MOL being one of them, in actually incentivizing the installation of energy-saving devices so that our footprint will be lower on the short term. The second lever is also to use transitional fuels. We've been trialing biofuel for a year between Canada and China, which gave us confidence about the technical use of biofuel and the impact also towards carbon reduction. But we're also using and having in our portfolio dual fuel vessels powered with LNG. 9 of them, 9 Newcastle Maxes, are in our chartered fleet portfolio, and we consider definitely LNG as a way forward to address the targets on the route to 2050. Last but not least, we have to prepare today for the net zero emissions and then the use of the fuels such as green methanol or green ammonia. So we're working towards, actually with the Global Maritime Forum and other organizations to understand better not only the safe use of this fuel, particularly for ammonia, but also what does it take to actually bridge the cost gap that we have compared to conventional fuel, which is non-negligible, about $200 to $250 a ton of CO2 that is required, that at this stage we don't have yet a pathway to bridge.
Thank you, Laure. So my first question, you are very positive people, and that's super nice. But we have also made analysis that when it comes to the target of 5% zero emission fuels by 2030, then the industry as a whole is off track. So my first question is, how do we get on track? And perhaps Watanabe-san, you will try to answer that question first.
Super nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, so yeah, I think that to achieve the 5% target in 2030, the key is how to secure the capacity of supply or supplyability of the zero emission fuel in time. And we in the international shipping industry must be the only potential off-taker of the zero emission fuel for vessels. So it is expected that we, international shipping, must provide the off-take commitment with the suppliers project in order to make them feasible and bankable. But if we think about the big burden of the extra cost of the new green fuel or the hydrogen-based fuel, our industry cannot bear the burden alone. So we really need the mechanism to share the cost, extra cost, together with our customer or customer's customer, or with the entire human society, because we are the service provider of the seaborne transportation for entire human society. The ZEMBA, the Zero Emission Maritime Buyers Alliance.
Yes.
ZEMBA, we have the Ingrid-san in this summit. Their forward-looking approach is quite encouraging because thanks to their first tender, we, international shipping, could, it is the first in the long history, we could transfer the value of the shipping decarbonization to our customers. Yes. Although it was within the container ship industry, I expect their framework will be expanded to other type of the seaborne transportation. But the effort or the achievement in voluntary space like Zenba, I think it can cover just a part. So the new effective regulation by the compliance or IMO would be essential to keep ourselves in the right track to the interim goal in 2030 and also ultimate goal of the net zero emission by or around 2050.
Thank you. Laure, you have I'm sure, some of the same challenges as MOL. How do you see the problem of reaching the 5%? Will you reach the 10% goal you have set yourselves, and what are you doing to achieve it?
I mean, when we look at what is necessary, we definitely value and acknowledge the work of the IMO to actually put a bold ambition towards net zero by around 2050. Before then, we could find our way with fuel efficiencies measures and LNG usage. Today, the industry has no other choices than working collectively on finding solutions to use net zero fuels. So this is and basically the work that is ongoing, the 2 years period to define the midterm measures, not only on the economic point of view, but also on the technical point of view, and the safety standards, the safety regulation, the fuel standards are equally important to really deliver on the ambition and the intermediate milestone. So I think, what we are focusing on first and foremost are the low-hanging fruit with the fuel efficiencies, and which is also very pleasing to see because this solution exists, where there is a need collectively to embrace these solutions, is also how we are partnering and working together to actually incentivize the use of these energy-saving devices on a fairly way to basically be able to accelerate the lower consumption of fuel. I give an example of what I mean in terms of fair partnership. If you take silicone paint, for example, we know that it provides fuel reductions ultimately, but generally as a charterer, we have a 1-year charter party eventually with a ship owner. So if that vessel is investing in silicone paint, which generally lasts in terms of efficiency for 5 years, well, it will be fair that we are paying for 1/5 of that investment. And then, the ship owner investing, trying to find a way for the next, contract and time charter to basically have the funding, the complementing funding of their investments. So there are these practical ways that we need to really think as an industry on accelerating, grabbing this low-hanging fruit, which are low capex, short return on investments. So that's really the first thing.
And obviously we talk about money, you talk about the price of carbon and investments, like someone has to pay for all this somewhere, and can we avoid that the consumers ultimately have to pay more for their products and their transportation services and so on?
Economic measure, and probably Arsenio, you will develop further on this part, are necessary. Probably insufficient, not sufficient, but they are necessary in terms of defining what are the market-based measures, in terms of whether we call them, carbon tax, levy, price. Ultimately, it will end up being paid by the end users, and that's a mechanism actually to pass the effort throughout the value chain. And when you look at where the carbon prices are today, if you take the example of Europe, it's in the realm of $100, if you bear with me on that comparison. with basically what it takes to decarbonize shipping, which is more in the realm of $200, $250. It's about, nearly not half of it. So it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. So how we're closing that gap?
Right? That's per ton fuel.
Per ton of CO2.
Yeah, per ton of CO2.
To make it clear. So we have to find other ways, and then looking at throughout with all the partners of the industry, of the value chain, being on the chartering side, definitely on our side, for the fuel side, at developing the optionalities and taking the cost on board of the optionalities of the dual fuel at the asset level, at the ships level, for example, is an important part. How the ports are also playing their role, how the banks financing the ships and the ship owners are also playing their part. And how also the fuel producers themselves, can for their future market, that shipping will be for them on top of power generation, for example. If I take the example of ammonia, will also play their part. And we are looking at basically ways, particularly across green corridors, which are the catalyst, where there are more activities, more business, more trades, to actually be the ecosystem to implement this approach where we can share the bill.
And Arsenio, you have helped set this target of 2030 and 2050, and now you need the industry to deliver on those goals. How do you see the issue? What are the big stumbling blocks, and what can the industry do, not just the shipping industry, but the wider maritime industry?
When we look at the decarbonization of shipping in the transport sector, this is a combined approach. And you were talking about how we're going to reach the 5%, for example, which is the low-hanging fruit there, because of course we're aiming at 10% as well of the uptake of alternative fuels. The technical and economic measures will play their part. And that's the reason why we have the commitment to actually adopt them last year and next year, and then introduce them for implementation in 2027. And that would also stimulate further the production of renewable fuels. But it's the whole supply chain, and we have to all take responsibilities here. The work of the organization, and we will take the leadership here, it's, of course, set up the regulations that we will continue to improve as we gain experience as well, something that is very interactive in the regulatory process of IMO. We have other United Nations taking decisions like the COP last year in transitioning away from fossil fuels. All that plays into the hand, not just of shipping, but every sector that also needs to decarbonize. The call that I continue to make to the early movers, and that's from the countries that can provide incentives as well in order to stimulate this national development as well, when you look into port infrastructure, bunkering infrastructure, as well as the energy sector. And then we have the role of consumers, that's all of us, because we are living on the days where we want to order everything on the internet today and being delivered yesterday. Yeah. That has a price, and we all want to protect the environment and save the world. We also have to recognize that the way we're actually demanding from every supply chain, including shipping, has a cost, and that we all need to also learn how we do this. In the meantime, as we move forward with all these technical aspects and the technology that will be developed, it's those early movers and it's those stakeholders that can take the first steps. And we just heard some examples here of how they can achieve their own goals that they have set by 2030, 2040, and 2050, that will continue to allow us to then address the challenges for those that are more in need. And in the meantime, we also continue to elaborate the necessary measures on safety that we cannot forget, because this is a process where we can't look just at the reduction of emissions without taking into account all the safety aspects and the training required for the professionals of the future that will be operating these new vessels.
Thank you. We are running a little bit out of time, but Watanabe, when it comes to the Japanese market and the Asian market, where does it fit on this path to decarbonization? I know you've talked about like the wide fleet that exists in Asia.
Thank you. Yes, as you talked, Japan is one of the maritime hub in the world, and we have a very long history to develop and maintain the very robust shipping cluster in Japan. And also in Asia, we can observe the accumulation or integration of the many key players in the maritime value chain, shipbuilders, owners, operators, managers, manning agent, and financial institute, and port authority, and so on. So I think Asia can be the very important role, take the important role to maintain or to drive that momentum of the decarbonization. And if I add one thing from the viewpoint of the just and equitable transition, there are so wide variety of type and size of ships, and so wide variety of route and mode of the ships in Asia, and all of them sustain the lives and the economy of the people. So we should respect the diversity in the seaborne transportation, and we also try to secure the diversity in the solution of the shipping decarbonization as well.
Thank you. And now it's time for esteemed press to ask questions. And I can see I have the first one down here, and we may need to put in the earpiece if there are questions in Japanese.
Martin Kölling with the German financial daily Handelsblatt. You were talking about corridors and diversity of fuels. I wonder how these corridors will shape the industry. What corridors are most likely in what areas with which fuel?
Essentially to the iron ore grain corridor between Western Australia and Southeast Asia, where and that's personal views given the setting of Australia, and also the ambition on the whether it's on the Japanese side as an example, that corridor will more be skewed towards ammonia and LNG, at least on the short term. Given the trades and the availability of these fuels, it doesn't mean that there will not be any biofuel or methanol, for example. But that's definitely on the Australian point of view, the development of ammonia, and also in Japan, the interest and the focus as well towards ammonia use will make it available. But it's very depending, on the countries themselves. If you take a country, like China will provide all the fuels. Singapore will position themselves as a distributor of all the fuels. So this corridor, if they are basically anchored on a China-based or on a Singapore-based, for example, will have more colors in terms of fuel propositions.
And just for those who are not familiar with green corridors, it's basically a way to test some of the technology and legislation and legal issues that are required to use some of these fuels in a particular area, particular ship. Yeah? Further questions? Julian?
Thank you. Julian Bray from Tradewinds. I'd like to ask the panelists, what message would they like to take to those outside this room, this event, who remain skeptical of the need to move now, to move soon? Those smaller ship owners, those people particularly in the energy value chain, that appear to be resistant to this initiative to start moving now, soon. Thank you.
We know definitely decarbonizing shipping is expensive. So they are low-hanging fruit that are low investments, short payback, and again, that can be worked with charterers or with the industry. That should be, the first steps if it hasn't been adopted. But ultimately, also the why now is that the life expectancy of a vessel is 25 years plus minus, and if we want to be net zero by 2050, we have to start now.
We have time for a couple of more questions. Oh, Watanabe-san, you want to add something?
May I
Yes.
answer to Julian's question? Yes, we are facing the very big difficulty because we are part of the private sector, and so we should be mindful of our book or our financial statements, because among the other important stakeholders, shareholders and investors are also our important stakeholders. So we need to make the effort, endeavor in the decarbonization and sustainability will make the good result in financial statement also. But that is the reality. But we also should focus on another realities, and it is the weather, the hot summer, and we can see the reality through the media broadcasting almost every day: typhoon, hurricanes, flood, or the wildfire, and so on. And I'm seriously suspect someone want to assassinate me by the heat and humidity in the summer in Tokyo. So if we need some the driver to go ahead, we should always think about the reality, the weather, the climate change we are facing every day. Thank you.
We have time for one more question. 5 minutes. We have plenty of time. You're a journalist? No more? Yes, please.
NHK の出川と申します。主に渡辺さんにお伺いしたいんですけども、海運の脱炭素というのはIMO が監督して行われるプロジェクトだと思いますけども、各国政府の役割はどういうふうになっているのか、特に日本政府はこの取り組みの中でどういう役割を果たして、渡辺さんとしてこれをどういうふうに評価をされているかということについて伺いたいと思います。
ありがとうございます。日本語ではお答えします。おっしゃる通りでありまして、国際海運の、エミッション排出というのは日本国には付随してません。なので、私たちの取り組みというのは IMO ドミンゲスセクレタリージェネラルのリードの下で、行われています。一つの理由としてはですね、船はもういつも世界中のどこかを運航して旅しておりますので、各国がなんていうんですか、レギュレーションのコンシステンシーですかね、各国がまちまちのルールを、持っていると私どもとしてはなかなかそれに適用することができないっていうのが一番大きな理由であります。ですのでお答えとしては日本国政府というのは今MEPC などのIMO の会合に自分たちの主張アイデアを持って出かけていって、そこで各国と議論すると。でそこで、最終的なレギュレーションの形が決まっていくということであります。ですので出川さんのご理解の通りというのが、答えになります。
Arsenio has a comment.
Just very briefly. One of the singularities of shipping is that it's a global sector. And as such, the International Maritime Organization regulates ships, not the countries themselves. And we work on the normal favorable treatment approach, principle. And the reason is because you have ships that can be operating under several different flags, states, throughout their operational life. Now, a country like Japan, who is a core maritime nation, brings a lot of experience and expertise into all the regulatory process at IMO, from shipbuilding, ship ownership, as well as the development of technology. And that includes all the aspects that we're analyzing now, from autonomous ships to decarbonization to improve the training for the safety of the people on board. As well as port operations, which is also another area that is intrinsically related between decarbonization in the maritime sector and the role of the different countries.
And I believe that was what we had time for. And as I said, I hope you will reach out if you have further questions. And you are also welcome to engage with our people later in the conference. Thank you.
はい、この後写真撮影のセッションを設けますので、もし写真撮られる方がいらっしゃいましたら前方にご移動いただければと思います。